Hello to everybody. What we're going to do is we're going to go through this session. This is, I think when it went out, it was categorized as a level 1. It's a 1-hour, just basic overview of the software. We're going to get into a little bit beyond just kind of the overview of the software, spend some time talking about databases, database management, backup, all of that, and also looking at creating a satellite systems and how that gets all linked in. That should take us to about an hour. Anything that I'm doing in this presentation, if you want to ask the question, I'll say it again, click on that Q&A, type in that question. Bruce is monitoring all these questions, so he'll be either answering for you or he'll be unmuting and chiming in with me and having me go over something specific to the question, or just answering it directly right there. So utilize that Q&A button right there, and we will get you the information that you came to this short course for. What I'd like to point out before we get started is that we have some online resources. Strongly encourage you, if you have not visited these sites, to go visit them. We have 2 specific websites that will direct you past mowers and everything else if you go to Toro.com, which when you go to Toro.com, great website, but it's all inclusive. Toro has a lot of products. You may not be aware, we bought with a company called Charles Machine Works recently, that's Ditch Witch. We've got all these companies, all these products. So instead of you navigating through all of that to get what you want, if you go to that www.sentinel.toro.com website, you're going to find Sentinel-specific information. I would imagine we'll post these training videos up on there. We already have a few that are on there now. They were created a few years ago, so they might be a little dated. They're shorter. There are 5-6 minute videos on certain things. If you want to get more specific information on sprinkler heads, valves, drip irrigation, our large turf rotors, our large commercial rotors, TS 120, 170, which are great for large athletic fields, synthetic applications, go to the specifier.toro.com website and you'll find all of that, details, specifications, everything that you would want to have right there. And also, I should mention that we have a sister company. You may be familiar with Irritrol products. We sell a lot of Irritrol throughout the United States. Irritrol website is just that, irritrol.com. So just go to that and you'll find everything that you want about the Irritrol products. So take advantage of those resources. That design guide, if you're going to be in the communication class later this afternoon, we're going to be going through several pages of that design guide, which is downloadable on that Sentinel website. I'm going to define a few things here for people that, hear a name and they say, well, what exactly does that mean? In the irrigation industry, we like to use the word satellites, and we're not referring to what's up in space. We're talking about field controllers. When you buy a Sentinel controller, and we build it in Riverside, California, and we ship it to your distributor and they deliver it to you, it's installed. That field controller with that faceplate is referred to a lot of times as satellites. It's going to be referred to satellites in the software. And so those satellites can be 12 station, they can be a 204 station 2-wire. It's the same thing. So whenever you hear that word satellite, it's referring to that field controller. We're going to get into organizing our software a bit by using what is called systems. When you create a system in the Sentinel software, essentially what you're doing is you're creating a group of controllers. This is solely for your own purpose of maximizing speed and, I'd say, activity of what you want to do out in the field. So say, for instance, you're a manager of a large park department. Your park department has 4 different areas in the city, and you might have a weather station or weather source that affects the north side, another one that does the south, east, and west. Well, you could create 4 different systems and have these weather stations do functions related to only those controllers that are in those areas. If you wanted to have a system that grouped everything, which most people do, then you could have a 5th system that says citywide controllers. So it's a way of organizing what you've got out there. Now, if you've been around irrigation for any period of time, programs, you've always heard the word programs. In the irrigation Sentinel world, we tend to use some different terminology in software. You're going to see a version of software today that's got some different names in it, and I'll explain why. But we originally called that automatic operations. You'll click on it, and what it shows is programs, okay? 16 programs in Sentinel. They were originally labeled A1 through D4. That has changed, and I'm going to show you. That's essentially schedules of operation that I want program 1 to have these 10 zones. They're going to run for 30 minutes when they come on. They're going to run, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and they're going to start at 2 a.m. Simply, that's all that is. On most of the screens in the Sentinel software, there is a send button and there is a receive button. You need to understand why there is send and receive. And the reason for it is that Sentinel controllers store the data like your computer stores data. If I go into my Sentinel software and if I change anything on a screen and I hit save, it is now captured and saved in that software. But guess what? It's not in the controller until there is a send command. The send command can be a manual send command right from that screen. So right at the top, if I make a change, I hit the saved it to my database in my computer. I hit send, it transmits out to the field. Now I have synchronized my controller with my software. I can do the opposite. A lot of systems go in and the field controllers or the satellites are programmed first. And when they're programmed, then software gets installed on a computer. Well, the last thing you want to have to do is duplicate effort and go back into the software and say, well, let me create the program the way it is in the controller. No, no, no. What you're going to do is establish communication with the controller, which we're going to do this afternoon in the class, and then use the receive button. The receive button will bring back whatever is in the controller into the software. You can decide at that point whether you want to save it in the software or reject it in the software. And so when you're in your controller and you make a change, say you're editing a runtime, what will happen is you'll see a little flashing cursor next to whatever item that you're about to change. That flashing cursor on the controller, and I'll go to the controller here in a bit, is essentially your prompt to say save. On the controller, by pushing the enter button or pushing the dial in, is the exact same thing as hitting save in your software. The only difference is that you're saving it to the memory of the controller. So if you downloaded programs to your Sentinel controllers, and they have everything they need to know about running whatever days of the week, the run times, the start times, you can turn your computer off. The controller is going to perform all of those functions. It is not dependent on the software telling it what to do. Now, if you're running certain additional items and monitoring weather stations, rain buckets, doing automatic functions such as optimization, then the computer stays on, and then it does interact with the controllers automatically, but you set that up for it to happen. So I'm going to start off defining what happens when you first install Sentinel software. First of all, you're not going to see all those controllers there. But what you're going to see is a single tab. When you get a new copy of software, and you install it onto a computer, whether it's a laptop, a server, desktop, PC, works, whatever it is, it comes in and you only see one tab in this panel on the left side that says satellites. That does not give you full functionality. Does not allow you to communicate via IP. It only allows you to communicate via serial. Does not allow you to do any kind of weather station operations. Does not allow you to do group functions with systems because those tabs do not exist. Once you install this, you need to contact your distributor and contact Toro. And what happens is we provide an unlock code to the software. Now, the reason that we have that Sentinel Lite version, originally when we came out with a 2-wire controller, the only means of inputting decoder addresses were either from the keypad of the controller or via the software. We wanted to make it easy. So we came out with this Sentinel Lite version that we could distribute to a contractor where they could just hook up to the controller using a serial cable and download decoder addresses. That was pretty much the reason. But we also want to make sure that we're registering everybody that has software, and we know who has it out there, so we can get you updates and stuff. So we need to give you unlock codes. When you get the unlock code, you notice that there are 2 other tabs that appear in that panel on the left. Now you see the Systems tab, and now you see the Weather Sources tab. When you see the Systems tab, that gives you the capability of creating those groups of controllers. When you see the Weather Sources tab, that gives you the capability of adding in weather stations, rain buckets, soon to be our internet-based DT that you'll have access to. So it's pretty cool stuff. You don't want to have Sentinel Lite, okay? If for some reason in the middle of the season, this has happened occasionally, and say your IT department pushes out a Windows update, it could break connection with a configuration file, and your software might revert back to Sentinel Lite. If you come in one day and you look at your software and you go, hey, where did the other tabs go? Don't freak out. Just contact us. We'll give you another unlock code, get you back up and running where it was. This has happened occasionally with certain Windows updates. Not often, but it can happen. Just be aware of it right there. Bruce, any questions that we need to talk about?
So far, so good, Jim.
Okay. I'm going to start off going across the top menu bar up there. And we're going to start at the left side, and we're going to work across the right and define what each thing does. Again, if you have any questions on any of these things, by all means, type them in the Q&A so Bruce can interject and stop me if we can address this. First thing, setup. Very important. When you get your software loaded, first place you're going to go to is setup. And the reason for that is that setup allows you to create a database. A database is essentially a file that whatever data you put into your Sentinel software will be stored in that file. It's like starting a new Microsoft Word document. You go in there and you open up Word and you go new, and then you say, okay, I'm going to do this document here, and you're going to do a save, and you're going to save it as, you're going to call it, work order, February 2020 or whatever it's going to be. You're creating a database. When you create that database, it's saying, okay, anything I make a change to in my software needs to be stored in this file. That database will have a file extension with the letters M as in Mary, D as in dog, B as in boy, MDB. And it stands for Microsoft Database. That MDB file, that database file, can be located anywhere on your computer, anywhere on your server. I will tell you, though, you want it in a safe location. I have seen people put databases out on the desktop of their computer, out in the open. And it may say irrigation.mdb or whatever it may be. And all of a sudden, you come in one day, you say, you know what, I got to get rid of all this crud that's on my desktop. And you start throwing it all in the recycle bin. And all of a sudden, you take your database and throw it away. So you want to make sure that you have this in a secure location. I would suggest putting it in a folder under documents. or, under documents, irrigation, subfolder irrigation, whatever it may be, put it in a safe place. I'm going to go through a little bit of database management here later and show you how to back this up also off the computer, which you want to do. This is also where we go to unlock the software, which would be in setup. It has other functions in here as well that apply more to some advanced classes that we'll be getting into. As I move over to the right, the next button that I'm going to talk about is a button that you would be using. We're going to talk about this in the class. I'm going to go into the software and show you. Manage. Manage is where you add your controllers into the software. So let's say that you have a system and currently you've got 10 controllers. You're doing a new park. You're going to add, say, 5 more. What you're going to need to do is, first of all, address those controllers in the field to a number that you want them to be. So let's just go say that they're going to be 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And then you come in to manage, and I'm going to show you live in the software later. You're going to click on manage, and you're going to add those controllers 11, 13, 12, 13, 14, and 15 to the software. If you wanted to, you could add a system that is specific to those controllers and call it, North Park or whatever it may be called, or a high school or something like that, which then allows you to group those controllers to that particular system right there. So this is what you use manage for. As we move to the right, a class that has not been put out yet, but you will see probably later this week, I'm going to start creating a schedule for some of the more advanced classes. We're going to do a class specifically pretty much on that button right there. It says scheduler. Scheduler is used for those sites where you have a large water source and you want the software to automatically create a schedule so that you maximize the flow output of your water source. So let me give you an example. Here I have 15 controllers. This is actually from a database at a VA cemetery up in Massachusetts. And they had 15 controllers. It all comes off of one water source that I believe is running at about 700 gallons per minute pump station. Data gets input into each one of these controllers as to the approximate flow on each station. And then you go into scheduler. If you wanted to, you could put some constraints on it by saying, okay, I've got a 2.5-inch pipe here, I've got a 3-inch pipe, whatever it may be, that will limit the amount of flow that goes through there. Then I can go into scheduler and let it automatically calculate what should run so that I maximize my flow. And as you can see right there, that was optimized at about 700 gallons per minute. And it starts around 8 p.m. It shuts off sometime probably about 4 a.m. based on that. What this does is this takes the manual math out of you having to figure out, okay, I can start this program and it ends at 2 a.m. and I have to start this program at 2:01 and it runs till 4:30 and I have to start this program at 4:35. The software will do that for you automatically. But you've got to input this data. You can't just like wave a magic wand and it does it. It takes some input of the correct data. As you've always heard, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have good, accurate flow data, you're not going to get good performance on your optimization, but that's what the scheduler does. We're doing a class, a more advanced class that'll be published later this week when that's going to be specifically on that. Log files. If you access log from the top menu bar, what it's going to do, it's going to open up the most recent log file. Log files will show you the what ran, what alarms you have, flow, if you just captured flow, whatever it may be. Log files are important. If you've got any system with multiple controllers, you should have or will be, after all the training that's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to show in one of the classes how to create a log folder, put it in a good, safe place, and show you how to start capturing data and storing it into this log folder so you can retrieve it if necessary, especially your flow data and your alarm data, which is important. You can see right there, this has a couple of soil sensors. One of them is offline. The other two are communicating, and it tells me firmware version, everything else. So definitely important. The receive all and send all up at the top on the top menu bar, what that does is if I'm working in this open space where the big Toro logo is, and by the way, that's changeable. If you want to put, say, your city logo, your school logo, university, whatever it may be, if you're into WWE or whatever it might be, you can put any kind of image in there. It defaults to the Toro logo, but really what it is, it's the work area. It's where when you open something up, it appears in that big box. Obviously, the larger your computer screen, the more you can fit in there. I've been into some sites. I know one that's down in Bruce's area, and I want to say they've got a 36-inch screen. What is, I know Tallis Park. Bruce, the last time I was down there, had a humongous screen that they were using for all of this. So you can get whatever you want. If you're on a laptop, obviously that space is going to be much more limited. But you can open up multiple screens. If you make changes to all of those and you want to push them all out, all you got to do is hit send all up there. You don't have to go hit send on every screen. Or the opposite. Say you opened up a bunch of screens and you want to bring the data back from the field. They can be from different controllers. All you've got to do is just hit the receive all. And then that would bring back from any controller right there what you had open.
So, Jim, can I stop you there for a second?
Sure.
We had a question on the scheduler, and then how you gather the flow. And so, just to clarify that, if you do have a flow meter, you can put the system into learn flow, and it will learn the flow for each of the zones, and then it'll set that in your database. But you don't have to have a flow sensor. You just need to have an accurate estimate of how much the flow is for each of the zone for the scheduler to manage that.
And so, typically when we're running scheduler, it is across controllers that have one larger water source. You're normally not using a flow meter to detect individual station flows on these larger systems like that. So sometimes I've had customers go out there and they go through a site. I know one in particular in North Carolina where they just drove around with a handheld radio, turned on a station, looked at it, did a count of the number of sprinkler heads times what the output of the nozzles were approximately, and jotted down with the flow. So you can do theoretical flow on these. So it does require a bit of, that's why I was saying a bit of that upfront work to get it to behave properly and for you to get a good performance on the schedule. Any other questions, Bruce?
No, well, and not to get too far in the weeds, the reason that it's hard to do a learn flow on individual stations on a big water source is typically they have, let's say it's that site you had where it was a 7-inch or a 700 gallons a minute, that'd be a 6-inch water meter. So if you had a 50 gallon minute zone, that 6-inch water meter is not going to read that accurately.
Yeah, like that site in North Carolina, I believe has 25 controllers on it, one water source. So it would be, next to impossible to sit there and get a good accurate reading from the pump station, turn it on one zone at a time. So let me continue here. This next button on the right on the top toolbar says close all. If I open up a bunch of screens in this work area where the Toro logo is, and I've done what I needed to do, and I want to clean it up, if I click on close all, it's going to start making those disappear from the screen. Now, I'll tell you, if you've made a change on any of those screens and you've yet to save it, it will stop from closing that screen and ask you if you want to save it before it closes. That's your call at that point, whether you want it to close or not, or want to save it or not. But that's what that does. Moving over to the right from the close all, help. When you click on help, you're not going to get any kind of fancy manual or anything like that. Most of our training, I had a question that was emailed to me yesterday about training manuals. There is a training manual on that Sentinel.com website, but I'm going to tell you it's a little bit dated. And the reason for it is our software continues to evolve. And so keeping up with the manual on that would be almost impossible to try to do with as many changes as Sentinel has had over the last several years. Most of our training has been by video, and like what we're doing here, we're recording all this, and this is what's going to be a resource. And we already have those that are posted on that website right now. I think about 4 or 5 of them. But what the help does tell you is it gives you an indication of the status of your controllers. And this in this indication bar, let me get my little pointer here. Whatever is showing here would be a status over here of the condition of the controller. Green means that last communication was good. It's in the automatic mode, and that there are no problems with the controller. If you get this broken chain, that means whatever last attempt to communicate did not succeed. So that means that the power might be out at that controller. Might mean that the radio didn't make a radio communication. Might be that if it's an IP on there, somebody in the IT department came and turned off that IP address. If you get the alarm bell next to the controller, that means that something happened from the last time you communicated. That could be a multitude of things. It could be that there was a power cycle on the controller. It could be that there was a rain sensor and it tripped what's called an external alarm. It could be that you had a flow alarm. It could be that you had a bad solenoid. So there's multitudes of things. All it's doing is it's giving you at a glance on the left side of the screen, and I don't have it with the screen capture I have, but you'll see it when I pull up the software. So it's an at a glance kind of look at, hey, you need to go check this. The next one down, certain alarms you can set as warnings. You can set flow alarms like low flow, zero flow as warnings. You can set their 2-wire communication alarms. Come in with that logo right there with that exclamation, yellow exclamation mark. Then down below that, we have 2 different rain holds. We have, and this is dependent on firmware version. Okay? Firmware is whatever version you show in the controller. So when you boot your controller up or look at it in the software, it's going to show you version. Now, we have version software going back to 1 dot something. Probably anything that's the oldest in the field these days would probably be 1.41. Then we went up to version 2. The version 1 and the version 2 use the same faceplate. Version 2 stopped at 2.47, and then we started building the version 3. The version 3, if you're not familiar with it, let me just escape for a second here. And that's the version 3 faceplate. It's got the dial. It's got the buttons down here. Now, while we're on here, I want you to notice the nomenclature on the buttons on here, because that's going to impact what we're doing in our software too, or what the software looks like. So that's telling me what all these icons, and on here from version 3.2.1 forward, if you put everything in the controller in a rain hold, it's indicated by this red exclamation mark. Anything before 3.2.1, if you've got, I think we started off with the early 3s, were like 3.08, and then it kind of gradually went up from there. We went to 3.15, and then we had some intermediate versions there. If you put it in a rain hold, you would see the controller have an umbrella. Now, anything with the 3.2.1 and above, if you put, say, a program in a rain hold, Just one program, not the entire controller. You're going to get the rain umbrella next to the controller on the left side instead of the red exclamation mark. And this was a question. This was a request by one of our users, Jeff Coates at Notre Dame. I know that he was doing, a lot of partial rain holds, and he was using controllers that were pre-321, and everything was showing up with this rain umbrella. And he says, I don't know what I've got on rain hold. So we separated that out. The other thing that you're going to see on this screen is the software version. Okay. Now I'm running what's called a beta version for some future development of what we're doing with Sentinel. The latest version that you can get your hands on is version 3.3.4.8. And the latest firmware version is 3.60. We are going to be working with your distributors to make this available to anybody that wants it late this winter. So work with your distributor. They'll contact us, and we will work with them to get you the latest release version of software and the latest release version of firmware as well. Okay. Any questions, Bruce?
Well, Jim, let's clarify the software and firmware. That often comes up. A lot of people think that it's like updating a phone, that just because they've got a new feature that you'd want to bring it in. What I would suggest is if everything is, and Jim, you can probably clarify on that. Do you mind taking it from there?
Yeah, all I'm going to say, and I know where Bruce is going, if you're running your software and you're happy with what it does, and you're happy with your firmware and what it does, there is no real reason to update firmware and software. It's not a mandatory function you need to do. If you want some new features, and I'm going to be doing the first of the new feature class starting next Monday. If you want some of the new features that we're going to talk about in that class, it will require firmware update and it will require software update. Now, I should also address, because we talked about this yesterday, and I heard after we had the class, numerous customers contacting their distributors. If you are currently operating any version 2 faceplates, that is the controller that is all push buttons, no dial. I would strongly recommend you take a look at upgrading those through our distributors. We at Toro have an upgrade program where we do an exchange. We take the version 2 faceplate back from you. We sell you the version 3 at a heavily discounted price. I mean, really discounted price. And you start over day one on a new 5-year warranty. So to me, at the cost of it, it's worth getting the warranty. But you also get all the new functionality of the controller. This is one of the new functions right here. There is now, in the new software and the new firmware, there is security that you can set. You can set it in the software. And that's what this shows on my software screen right here, where it says permission level 4. That grants me access to come in and do certain things. If you have users that all you want them to do is to come in and make program changes, they can't touch anything else, you can set a level of security in the software now that does that. If you have users that all you want them to be able to do in the field is go turn things on manually and turn them off manually, never change a setting in the controller, you can do that now. But that requires a firmware update and a software update in order to do that. We're going to be going over specifics of that starting next Monday. Okay? Anything else, Bruce, you think I need to address there?
Nope, that's good.
Okay. Next thing here is profile. When you need to do, and this is not often used, I don't use it that much, but if I'm talking to a customer and they're explaining something to me that sounds kind of quirky, and we're talking about it over the phone, and a lot of times the easiest thing to do is for me to have them create what is called a profile and email it to me. It's not something you're going to be doing on a regular basis. It would be that, hey, for some reason I'm getting some funky, activity out of this controller, and instead of sitting there and trying to log into the computer and do this and this, you can just create a profile and export it and then email it. What happens is it's essentially like creating a zip file. It does not have a zip extension, so it's not going to be blocked through your spam or phishing type filter in your computer. I think it's got a PFL extension, which typically goes through right here, but it's a good way to share your data back and forth, especially with us and the people at NSN in Texas if we're trying to analyze a problem on there. I don't typically use this as a backup to my data right here. I'm going to go through the database and explain more about that. So let's get in more to details here. Need to keep an eye on the time with things. All right, so here's our configuration panel, site panel on the left. You've got satellite systems and weather sources. Okay, that's your field controllers. That's your groups of controllers. That's all your weather stations, rain buckets. One of the new things you're going to see me talk about on Monday is a new internet-based weather source that we'll be sharing with you here soon. So let's look at the menu when you click onto a controller. So I've created all these controllers in Manage. I've added them into my database. I've created whatever systems I want. Now I've got all of these controllers listed in the side panel. And I want to go in and see what I can do with all of these. Now, let me just explain something here while I've got that menu expanded on the left side right there. Let me get my laser pointer back. Depending on your version of software, the nomenclature is probably going to be different. If you've not had any software update in a while, where it says satellite settings, which matches up to that version 3 faceplate, yours says special data. Where it says zone data in your software, it says station settings now, because that matches up to the button on the V3 faceplate. Where your software might say automatic operations, it says schedule watering in the software, which is the button on the V3 faceplate. Where your software says unsent changes, it now says synchronize, and we've added a little icon. If you make a change to anything in that controller and you've yet to send it, a little like yellow arrow points or pops up next to synchronize to remind you that you need to send it. And this is still the same from where it was before on it. So let's look at what everything does in this menu. If I click on satellite settings, we're going to be going into satellite settings this afternoon on our communication short course, because we're going to be setting up controllers to communicate. This is where you're going to go to the comm settings tab. You're going to put in whatever means you're communicating to establish that radio communication, IP communication, cell data communication, whatever it might be. If you've installed flow sensors, you need to put K and offsets in here. You need to tell the controller whether you want it to go into learn flow. That's all under satellite settings. If you're using soil sensors, which I'm going to be doing a class specifically on soil sensors coming up soon, then you're going to need to go into satellite settings to let the software know whether this is a wireless or our new decoder type soil sensor and what programs they're associated to. So there's a lot of, this is satellite across. So anything I do here affects unit 102 because that's the one I did. That's the one I opened on here. It also tells me firmware version. And so if I go and I want to look at the firmware version, you notice this one, this is a test unit that we're using right now. This says 4.03 on it. So this would indicate to you what version it is. When we get into the communication class this afternoon, we're going to receive firmware from the controller to see what it has. so we know what it unlocks and what it keeps locked into the software. Oop, let me go back. Next function down in the menu is time and day. When you open up, and this has not changed, but this essentially synchronizes your computer time to the controller. You've got to have accurate computer time and date. If your computer time gets out of kilter and you push it out to the field, your controllers will get out of kilter. So you need to make sure that that's accurate. This can be done manually. This can be done automatically. We have an automatic function that we'll go through in a more advanced class that shows you how to set up your software to go ping your controllers periodically and say, hey, are you still showing the right time and the right day? What you don't want to ever have happen is that your software says that it's Saturday, the controller thinks it's Friday, and then the controller comes on in the middle of an event. So you want to make sure that you keep all this stuff synchronized. Very important. Station settings, formerly known as zone data, okay? This has a lot of information. Again, I'm going to be doing a specific class just on this screen right here, going into the details of what you can put. But just briefly, you can put names, you can tag stations with labels as to what they are, where they're located. If I want to assign these to certain groups that might be affected by a master valve, flow meter, all of this, I can have that tagged. This is where I would see my flow information. If I have a flow meter and I learn it, I'm going to receive it up here. And when I receive it, it's going to populate these screens. If I'm having to do a theoretical flow, I'm manually inputting this flow into these columns right here. If I'm tagging them to a hydraulic zone, I'm going to tag it right here in this. And then I got to keep going back to this laser pointer. If you're using ET, these two columns will need to be populated. This does not auto-populate. Now I can shortcut populate it, which I'm going to do in that class, and show you that, okay, I want all these to be 100. I want all these to be 75. I want all that. Bam, I can do it. Precip rates or application rates, you need to input this manually. There are shortcuts. Station types, one of the neat things about Sentinel, and maybe one of the reasons that you're a Sentinel customer, a Sentinel controller has the capability of doing many means of turning on valves. The old school way is just ribbon cables coming out of the faceplate down to the output boards, send an electrical signal. We do other means. We do short-range wireless, long-range wireless, DC latching solenoids, AC solenoids on wire. We do all kinds of things. In these green columns, if I'm doing one of these unique means of communication, I'm going to populate it here. I can have a combination. I could have some stations on local, some stations on wireless. I could have some stations on wireless. I could have some stations on 2-wire. We do a lot of custom controllers. So you have multiple flexibility here with your controller. Then moving over to the right, you're going to see what programs each station is in, which is a nice kind of at a glance function here. And what's really cool, you may not be aware of it, but on a version 3 controller, another good reason to upgrade, and with your current version of software should have this, is the ability to read amperage on an AC solenoid. When you receive back this screen, it's going to pull back whatever was the last amperage that it ran at. And if you look at the nominal current right there, all of them look normal except for one. I see one of them right there that's in the 4s. What this is telling me is I've got a solenoid that is looking like it's drawing more amperage, going weak, probably going bad here soon, or maybe somebody wired up 2 solenoids to one output on the controller, because most amp readings are going to be in the 0.2s right there, unless you're using one of our spike guard solenoids that we put on valves. But most of them are going to be in the 0.2s. So this is really kind of cool information that you get on this. Next thing down is schedule watering. We've got a class scheduled on this screen, I believe Wednesday, I think. This is the most important screen to have a full comprehension of, and the ability to know what everything's on here. This is what you go to day in and day out. This is where you're going to select your programs. You're going to put the stations on with run times, select start times, put percent scale, to, run days, all of that. Now, also based on the version software you have, these labels up here at the top on your program tab. So you see the one that's in the foreground. Mine says 1. Your software might say A1 and then go to A2, A3, A4. We got rid of that. That was all related to those version 2 controllers when we used to use the terminology of clusters and programs. We've eliminated that terminology and we've gone straight 16 programs into the software and into the controller. So if I were to flip over to the controller and go to the schedule watering button and I started flipping through, you're going to see PO1, PO2, PO3. That's program 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 16. The software now matches up with the version 3 faceplate on here. It's important to master this screen. The class I'm doing, I believe it's tomorrow morning, I'm going to talk about mastering this screen and talk about shortcuts within this screen, because this is what's going to drive your irrigation out in the field. If you learn anything within Sentinel, it's to learn this screen right here. Going down below the schedule watering, synchronize, used to be called unsent changes. And what this does is this pops up a series of boxes. And if you pop this up in your software and you have check marks in any of those boxes, what that is indicating to you is you've made a change related to whatever that box is checked. So right now, mine is checked on program 10 and on the satellite settings, one of the tabs in satellite settings. And it's reminding me that I still need to send these changes. So if I click on synchronize, and if I were to hit the send button up here at the top, that would push out just that change to program 10 and just that change to satellite settings. Now we have a more advanced feature that we have a number of users that what they do is they have their software automatically check at the end of the day when they're done making changes to anything and before you begin irrigating to see if there's been any changes to any controller in your database. If the software recognizes any of these changes, the software will automatically push the changes out. So you do not have to be manually hitting send. Manually made a change. Hit, oh, did I send it? Did I send it? If you're constantly making changes to your program, you want to have it automatically set up. That will be discussed in a future class. The graph screen has not really changed, but we've changed what you can graph. So when I say that, we've added some new sensors. We have soil sensors that now read upper and lower level soil moisture. It reads upper and lower level temperature. It reads upper and lower level salinity. It also reads your flow. So what's neat about the graph in the irrigation season, once you have those theoretical flows and you have programs, when you open up your graph screen, it's going to give you a blue flow graph. The blue flow graph will indicate what is supposed to run, indicating a graph. If I go up here and hit receive and I have it checked on flow and I hit receive, I'm going to overlay a green graph over my blue graph to compare, did my actual flow match up to my theoretical flow? What you see right here is a screen capture of an upper level temperature from a sensor. And this was the upper level temperature. You can see there was a big drop on January 28th right there down to 42. Now, some of our Canadian friends, Fargo, I am sure Minnesota, that if you were to do this, you're going to see some very cold temperatures in your soil right now. In addition to being able to pull these sensors, there are two buttons over on the right. They're not really noticed that much. One of them says temperature, one of them says current draw. If you were to click current draw, it's actually going to graph your amp draw of your solenoids as they ran through a cycle, which is pretty cool. If you want to see what's happening electrically and you think you've got some hiccups out there, plot the electrical draw. The temperature is the actual faceplate or the timing module temperature, the keypad. And we have that in there because we have some of these controllers that are located down in Phoenix, Arizona, and they're in stainless steel boxes, and down in Bruce's part of the world, in Florida in the middle of summer and high humidity. And if something starts to go squirrely, we can monitor the temperature of the controller. So this is more for troubleshooting purposes right here, but it's there. Hydro report. If I go down, this really hasn't changed. This is going to give you a historical report on water consumption, ET, downloads, and rain right here. I'm going to have a specific class on just generating reports. One of the cool things about this is that there is a way to extract this information automatically and import it into a customized Excel spreadsheet that you can make whatever you want and pull this data out and put it in that Excel spreadsheet. So if you wanted to start saying, I'm budgeting water and here's what I'm going against the budget, or how much money are we saving, because I can put a column in Excel on the cost of my water. We can do this automatically from this hydro report right here. This screen has not really changed activity alarm monitor other than the fact that when you receive it, it comes back and gives you the results in the foreground. It used to give you the screen where you'd see all your valve, kind of like the Excel spreadsheet. It's still there. It's just that you have to click on this. But this is going to show you what ran, any alarms that might be there, so on and so forth. If I wanted to go turn a station on, I just click on alarm monitor, click on report, do the valve, hit send. So it does the same thing there. Rain days, no change here. All you're going to do here is, you can see I've got everything set, all 16 programs set on a 170-day rain hold. This is typical of what you see for a winter shutdown. Just download a 250-day rain hold, leave all your programs in there, and when you're ready to take it out of rain hold in the winter, just download a 0 to it.
Hey, Jim?
Yes.
Can I have you show it's an underused tab in the rain hold, where where you can put actually a station on rain hold, which is a feature I don't think a lot of
give me just a second. I think this is my last PowerPoint slide, and then I'll go to that in the software. Okay?
Yep.
So the last in the menu is percent scale, which essentially is just that. All we're doing here is that you can percent scale the entire controller, individual programs if you want to. When we get into our program screen, our training tomorrow, that becomes much more beneficial on it. So now what I'm going to do is flip over to software, and the first thing I'll do is show what Bruce just asked. Now you see I've got my configuration panel with all my controllers. I've got a couple of them with some icons, one with a broken chain, a couple of them with a broken chain alarm. Here's a green dot on it. If I go to rain days and I open up that screen I just showed you, and if I click on this tab, this is again kind of hidden tab, and where it says station days off, and say that I want to take this particular station and just take that station and put it off for 8 days. I've now downloaded to this controller 102 station 6. That station is off for 8 days. I can always come back in and remove that. So if I go to my activity alarm monitor now and I hit receive, You see how it's going to bring in this, and it shows an umbrella on station 6, and it says I have 8 days right there. I had a power failure on the 19th of January a few weeks ago. 10:42 in the morning, was off for 3 minutes, came back on at 10:45. I've yet to clear it out. So anyway, any other questions, Bruce, that I need to do before I get into database management?
Nope, all good.
Okay. If anybody, I know we're getting close to noon. I've got about 10 more minutes. I've got to go. I want to go through here. If you've got the time, you're welcome to stay on. I got a little wordy, I guess, on some of this stuff, but I want to go over database and the manage screen. Take me about 10 minutes. So I just clicked on setup. I'm going to go to database. Now, when I get to database, I already have a database because obviously I have controllers in the left panel. If I want to change over to another database, all I've got to do is click on browse, and it defaults to the location where all of my databases are. I'm going to click on new database, and now the new database is in this location line. When I hit save, it prompts me, do I want to change over to new database? And I'm going to hit yes. And you'll notice what happened is that I went from all of those controllers that were listed in that database to these 3 because I have a new database that I'm working from. Now, I talked about this yesterday, and I'll mention it now. We have customers that waste a lot of time going through the season and making changes in the, from spring to summer, summer to fall. And they're consistently making these changes year after year after year. So that might be run days. It might be start times. It could be percent scale, whatever it might be. Instead of making those changes over and over and over again, what you're going to want to do, I'm going to click this button, and it's going to open up essentially a Windows screen of that same screen I was on. You see, it's got all my databases, and I'm right here where it says new database. Say that I was constantly making changes to this database called new database. What I'm going to do, I'm going to right click it, I'm going to copy it, and I'm just going to come out in the open, and I'm going to right click and paste. Now I have new database copy. I'm going to right click it one more time and rename it, and I'm going to call it spring season. So now what I'm going to do is open up the spring season database, make those changes to it, leave my other database alone. So I can start the season off using this database here. And then when I get to the summer where I've got all of my run days already done, my start times, everything the way I want it, just go in and browse and change it to the database that I want it to be on. And change it, save it, and as quick as that, I'm now running that new database. Now, I would also recommend that you back up your database. Now, we have a backup button right here, but all it's going to do is just create a new file extension to it. I like to have a database backed up off of the computer or the server where you're working. Most people are running Sentinel from a laptop, desktop, whatever it is. Most people store their databases in the same location they run their software. What I would suggest you do is that you click on this button right here and you come to the database that you want to back up. And I'll click on this database right here and I copy and I paste it somewhere else. Now, I can paste it somewhere else on this computer. Preferably what I want to do is take it off the computer. So if I come up here to where it says send to, you notice down here, all I had to do is move my mouse. So I'm just going to go here one more time, and I'm going to go to this, and I'm going to right-click it, and I'm going to come down to where it says send to, and without even clicking a button, it opens up this window, this menu. And you notice about halfway down it says USB, because I put a USB stick, a flash drive in my computer, and I'm going to click it. I just sent that database offline to that USB. I'm going to put a label on that USB that says database. I'm going to stick it in a drawer because computer hard drives crash, computers get stolen, something quirky happens, could get a virus, whatever. You want to make sure, especially if you've got a large system, that you have a backup. Just also remember, worst case scenario, if you've downloaded all your programs into your field controllers and for some reason you lose the computer, hard drive, you don't have a backup, worst thing that could happen is you come in here and you have to recreate all your controllers and then you receive. Okay? So it's not a lost cause. So let's go in here for just a moment and explain to you what I've got on this. I'm going to get rid of everything that I've got on here first. Okay? Let me get rid of all this, and I'm going to delete this out, and I'm going to delete this out, and I'm going to get rid of these controllers. Okay, so now I've got this new database that I just logged in, and when I first bring it in, I click on Manage up here, and this is what opens up. And we're going to do this afternoon also in the communication class. I have 3 empty boxes. The box on the left allows me to add a system. You see how I move my mouse over the green button and it says Add System. I'm going to add a system, and I get a little dialog box that pops up on my other screen. I'm going to move it over, and I'm going to call it All Campus Controllers. Okay? And I'm going to click OK, and it appears in my system box right here. And I'm going to click on another one right here, and I'm going to do call it sports fields. And I'll click OK. So I've got 2 systems created right here. No controllers. So let's add some controllers. You see how I put my mouse over the green button? It says Add New Unit to Database. So now I'm going to bring this little box over here, and I'm going to just start off with 001, and I'll click OK. And now it's in the controller box. I'm going to do another one, and I'll do 002, and then I'll do one more, and I'll do 003. So now I have 3 controllers. Let's say unit 3 is one that I'm going to have on the sports field, but 1 and 2 are just out on the campus. So what I'm going to do is I want to start associating these controllers to these system names. I want to link them to these groups, because if I go right now over here on the left panel and I see my 2 systems, All Campus Controllers and Sports Fields, you see if I click it, I've got a menu. Say I wanted to sync the time and day. Well, if I click on sync time and day, it's not going to do a darn thing because I have no controllers assigned to that system name right there. So I need to link these controllers to that. Well, if I go up here and I click on one and I come into this button, you see how they're pointed to this middle box? I can move one into the middle box while this name is highlighted over here. I could go down to 2 and do the same thing. If I want to just move them all, come down to this third button, and it associates any controller I've got in this controller box to that system. Now I'm going to highlight sports fields. I don't want 1 and 2 on there. I just want 3, so I come down to 3, and I highlight 3, and now I've moved 3 in here. So when I click on All Campus Controllers and I go time and day and do send time and day, you go to 1, 2, and 3. If I go to sports fields and I say time and day, send time and day, it's only going to 3 because that's the only controller that I synchronized with. I mean, I associated it with.